Flames consumed the forest like a fever that refused to die. The sky glowed in molten reds, trees collapsing under the weight of their own heat. Beneath the roar, one creature refused to run. A lone wolf crouched at the mouth of a den, her body curved protectively over what the fire hadn't yet claimed. Her fur smoked at the edges, the scent of burning flesh curling upward into the night. Around her, the ground pulsed with heat, snow turning instantly to steam. She pressed her chest against the earth, blocking the inferno's breath from reaching what lived beneath her. Every heartbeat thundered against the rhythm of collapsing trunks. She could flee into the river, vanish, survive, but she didn't. In her stillness burned something older than fear, deeper than instinct. A promise carved not by nature, but by defiance. Beneath her ribs, the smallest sounds of life answered back. The air trembled as if alive, bending the light into warped halos around her shape. Smoke coiled like serpents through the den's entrance, wrapping her in a haze of molten breath. The wolf's body was a wall of muscle and will, trembling yet unbroken. The fire advanced, licking at the edges of her fur, turning silver strands into glowing embers. The ground cracked beneath her paws, heat pushing through frozen soil like buried thunder. Somewhere deep below, small hearts fluttered, a fragile orchestra playing against the sound of ruin. Her lungs filled with ash, her sides shuddering with every inhale. She didn't blink. Her eyes mirrored the inferno, twin reflections of defiance surrounded by death. When a branch collapsed behind her, sparks scattered across her back like a crown of stars. She held her ground. What she guarded wasn't her own kind. It was the future the fire tried to erase.
Inside the den, the air was thick with damp soil and the slow hum of survival. Smoke seeped in faint threads, turning the dark into a living, breathing storm. Tiny bodies shifted beneath the wolf's chest, pressing closer to her warmth. The scent of blood and pine filled the narrow hollow, mixing into something primal and sacred. Outside, the fire screamed, tearing through bark and bone, but the den pulsed with quiet defiance. The wolf's tail twitched once, brushing against the earth as she adjusted her stance. Her breath came shallow, hoarse from the heat, each exhale a ghost rising to join the smoke. She could hear the world collapsing above, trees falling, stones cracking, the forest dying in waves. Yet within that suffocating dark, life persisted, trembling but unbroken. The den was no longer just a refuge. It had become a heartbeat carved into the earth, guarded by the last creature who refused to yield. The sound of the fire was a voice now, vast and relentless, whispering through the valley with the language of endings. Every tree that fell sent shockwaves through the soil, each vibration echoing into the den's cramped belly. The wolf pressed lower, ribs scraping against stone, her breath shallow but steady. The air tasted of iron and smoke, the bitter perfume of extinction. Under her flank, small shapes huddled close, drawing life from her warmth. She could feel their tiny lungs pushing against her chest, desperate but rhythmic. Sparks drifted through the entrance like falling stars, extinguishing on her fur with soft hisses. She ignored them. Her focus narrowed to breath, to pulse, to the simple act of existing in defiance of destruction. The flames clawed closer, painting the sky red. Somewhere above, a tree split open like a wound. Still, she didn't move. Her silence became the last prayer of the burning forest.
Before the fire, there was only cold, a stillness so deep it swallowed sound. Snow lay heavy on the ridges, muting the world beneath a skin of glassy frost. Through that silence moved a single wolf, thin and scarred, her breath hanging like smoke from a dying fire. She walked without destination, the kind of movement born not from hunger, but from habit. Each step left a perfect print before vanishing under drifting powder. Her ribs showed through her winter coat, scars tracing memories of dominance and defeat. The air was clean, cruelly beautiful. Far away, a motion sensor blinked red, its camera fixed on a narrow valley. It caught her silhouette, head low, pace cautious, a creature taught by pain to expect punishment. Then she stopped. Her ears twitched toward a sound faint as breath, a cry thin enough to vanish if ignored. She turned toward it, moving through the snow like a shadow that had chosen purpose. The cry returned, breaking the silence like glass. It rose once, fractured, then fell again into stillness. The wolf froze, muscles tight beneath her fur. Her breath fogged the air in quick bursts as she tilted her head, listening. The wind carried the scent of fear and milk, infant, prey, something lost. She moved. Snow splintered under her paws, branches brushed her sides as she threaded through narrow paths. Her body moved low, silent, predatory, though her eyes held something softer, an echo of recognition. She reached a clearing where fallen trees lay like bones. There, against a splintered log, a small bear cub trembled in the snow. Its fur was matted with ice, its eyes barely open. Steam rose faintly from its nostrils. The wolf's body stilled, instincts at war. The cub's breath hitched once, weak and uneven. The world waited for the law of nature to resume, but the law hesitated, and so did she.
Time slowed into silence so fragile it felt forbidden. The wolf's gaze fixed on the cub, her heartbeat pounding through the snow. It should have been simple. One snap of jaws, one act of instinct, and the hierarchy would be restored. Yet something held her still. The cub's chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath shallow, uncertain, fading. Snow drifted across its body, soft white shrouds forming where warmth was slipping away. The wolf's nose twitched, the scent was pure helplessness. She stepped closer, paw by paw, her body trembling with confusion. Above them, the forest watched without judgment. The air thickened with the quiet weight of decision. The cub stirred, made no sound, and slumped again into stillness. The wolf lowered her head, ears flat. And for a heartbeat, the wild held no predators, no prey, only two fragile bodies joined by the echo of loss neither should have understood. She lowered herself beside the cub, her chest brushing its small frame. Its fur was cold, stiff where frost had formed. She curled around it, pressing her belly to its side until the faint tremor of heat passed between them. The cub's breathing deepened, faint steam rising from its nostrils into the cold air. Snow melted in a perfect circle around them, water soaking into the frozen earth. The wolf's eyes half closed, exhaustion overtaking instinct. She began to clean the cub's face, her tongue tracing away dirt and blood. It was a motion older than hunger, a ritual of comfort. The cub stirred again, leaning into her warmth. Above them, snow began to fall heavier, covering their outlines, erasing their division. The forest exhaled, releasing its tension, one creature of prey, one of predation, bound together by breath. For the first time, survival no longer meant choosing who must die. Far above the valley, a motion camera blinked through falling snow. The lens caught the faint glow of fur against the white ground, a body curled around another, smaller one. In a research station miles away, the footage transmitted silently through static, one wolf lying beside a grizzly cub. The timestamp flickered. The image was blurry, impossible, yet the forms remained clear enough to defy denial. A scientist somewhere froze in disbelief, but the forest offered no explanation, The world below had paused its cruelty long enough for compassion to take root in the snow. The wind pushed drifts across their bodies, camouflaging predator and prey until they appeared as one single shape. The cub's breathing steadied. The wolf's ribs rose and fell in answer. Above them, the snow muted every trace of movement, preserving that impossible moment as proof that instinct could be undone by something older, mercy itself. At dawn, the wolf moved. The cub hung from her jaws by the scruff, limp but breathing. She stepped carefully through the undergrowth, avoiding the open paths where scent carried easily. Her tracks wound downward into a ravine where the ground softened. A memory guided her, a den long abandoned, carved by foxes, half collapsed from storms past. She slipped inside, nose brushing old bones scattered across the floor. The cub whimpered faintly, a small vibration against her teeth. She set it down, then circled twice before settling. The den's air was still, thick with decay, but safe from the wind. Her body curved around the cub, enclosing it completely. Outside, snow thickened again, falling in waves that buried their trail. The forest would not remember how they got there. In the hollow darkness, two species once bound by fear lay still, the boundary between them erased by warmth, by need, by the beginning of something sacred.
Snow muffled every sound outside the den, turning the forest into a cathedral of silence. Inside, the wolf's breath came in slow waves, keeping the air from freezing. The cub slept pressed against her chest, twitching in its dreams. Its pulse fluttered faintly beneath her ribs, steady enough to silence the primal hunger inside her. The scent of milk clung to its fur, remnant of a mother long gone. In that stillness, the rules of the wild faltered, uncertain of their own authority. Above the ridge, distant howls echoed through the dawn. Her pack was near, their voices sharp with command, summoning the lowest ranked to return. She lifted her head but didn't move. Each cry reminded her of what awaited: subordination, punishment, obedience. The cub shifted closer. The calls faded into wind. For the first time, she ignored her name, her rank, her law. She had already chosen something stronger than fear. By midday, frost glittered like powdered glass along the tree trunks. The wolf ventured out, careful not to disturb the layer of snow hiding their den. Hunger coiled in her belly, but the cub's scent clung to her like a reminder of purpose. She tracked the faint odor of rabbit through the wind, moving low, deliberate, controlled. Every step cracked softly under her weight, her body ghost-like against the pale horizon. When she struck, it was silent, efficient, merciful. The kill came quickly. The snow swallowed sound. She carried the prey back toward the den, blood trailing faintly on her muzzle. The cub stirred at her arrival, eyes fluttering open. She tore small strips of flesh and laid them near its mouth. The cub licked weakly, tasting life again. It was no longer just survival. It was recognition. Two orphans bound by the scent of loss and the quiet miracle of warmth returning.
Miles away, the scientist replayed the footage in silence. Data streamed across her monitor, temperature spikes, movement readings, sound fragments. It made no sense. The wolf was nurturing a cub of another species, not devouring it. Her field notes filled pages that no one would believe. She leaned back, eyes fixed on the static between frames, searching for logic where there was none. Nature was not supposed to feel, yet the lens captured tenderness with the precision of truth. She isolated the audio, a faint rhythm of breathing, two patterns intertwined. Her pulse quickened as she realized what she was hearing.
It wasn't chaos, it was coordination. 2 heartbeats syncing through warmth. She labeled the clip Event 28A, Cross-Species Nurture, but paused before saving. The title felt inadequate. Outside the lab, snow fell endlessly. Inside, she whispered an unspoken thought. Perhaps the wild was learning compassion faster than those who studied it. The wolf began to move at dusk, carrying the cub gently between her jaws. Her pack's scent lingered behind her like smoke after lightning. She didn't look back. Each step toward the eastern ridge deepened her exile. Wind carved new paths through the trees, filling her tracks as quickly as she made them. The cub's fur brushed her chest, faint vibrations against her heartbeat. The forest grew darker, thick with scent trails she didn't recognize. Above, the sky bled into deep blue, moonlight scattering across shards of ice. Every instinct warned of pursuit, of punishment, but something heavier anchored her forward, a quiet purpose that pulsed in rhythm with the tiny breaths she carried. Behind them, distant howls echoed again, colder now, angrier. She quickened her pace. By the time they reached the hollow of the valley, silence had replaced command. She had left not only her pack, but the rules that built it.
The den she found was small, half collapsed under the weight of years. Bones of its former occupant littered the entrance, thin, fragile, white. She pushed her way inside, the cub dangling softly from her jaws. The air was stale but safe, the ceiling low enough for warmth to cling. She laid the cub on a bed of old moss, its eyes opening briefly, glazed and unfocused. She pressed her muzzle against its flank, feeling the faint thrum of life beneath the fur. Outside, wind howled through the valley's throat, scattering snow into veils of white dust. Inside, she began to groom the cub again, cleaning its face until the scent of death faded. When she finally settled beside it, exhaustion pulled her down. The fire of hunger dimmed, replaced by something quieter. In the fox's grave, 2 survivors slept, one learning to protect, the other learning to trust a predator made of mercy. Morning broke gray and heavy. Light diffused through fog. The wolf stirred, stretching stiff limbs, her body weak from hunger, but renewed by purpose. Outside, the forest shimmered with frost, each branch glittering with frozen breath. A familiar scent rode the wind, her pack. The alphas were close, their musk thick with authority. Panic flickered beneath her ribs, but the cub's small movement against her leg held her still. She nudged it deeper into the den's safety before stepping outside. The air carried warning. Fresh tracks in the snow, heavy and deliberate, formed a half-circle around the hillside. They had found her scent. She looked upward, ears twitching at the distant chorus of howls gathering for pursuit. Her breath quickened, mist curling from her muzzle. She had broken the law written in fang and blood, and now judgment was coming. She didn't run. She turned toward the wind and prepared to defend the impossible. From the shadows between trees, the first shapes appeared, wolves of her own bloodline. Their bodies glided through snow with the discipline of predators taught never to question rank. The scent of dominance hung thick in the cold air. Leading them was the alpha, her pale fur bright against the gray horizon. She moved with regal precision, the rhythm of a creature accustomed to obedience. The lone wolf stood her ground, tail low but unyielding. Behind her, the den breathed softly. The cub made no sound. The air tightened, the boundary between defiance and death razor thin. The alpha advanced until their muzzles nearly touched, a silent measure of hierarchy collapsing. The pack circled, a living storm of fur and tension. The lone wolf lowered her head, not in surrender, but in focus. The moment before violence stretched into eternity, and the forest seemed to wait for which law, compassion or survival, would break first.
Through the ring of tension stepped another wolf, darker, broader, eyes flickering between loyalty and doubt. He had shared her lineage once, the same mother, the same pack that now demanded her blood. His scent reached her first, familiar and sharp with indecision. The alpha growled low, urging him forward, expecting his submission. Instead, he hesitated. His gaze shifted toward the den's mouth where faint warmth glowed within the dark. Something passed between them, memory, grief, unspoken understanding. The pack's leader turned sharply, impatient. In that second, the darker wolf moved, not toward her, but beside her. Two bodies aligned against authority, silent rebellion carved into the snow. The pack froze, uncertain. Hierarchy trembled. The alpha's eyes widened at the impossible sight of siblings standing united against their kind. Snow whispered under their paws, the sound of history cracking. For the first time, defiance replaced order, and the wilderness took notice. The first strike came without warning. The alpha lunged, teeth flashing white in the dim light. The siblings met her mid-air, a collision of muscle, fur, and sound that shattered the frozen morning. Snow exploded upward, blood blooming crimson against the white. The fight was swift, brutal, wordless. The den shuddered with each impact. The darker wolf took the brunt of the attack, jaws locked on the alpha's shoulder, while his sister darted low, driving her smaller body beneath the strike. The forest echoed with snarls, claws tearing earth. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The alpha stumbled back, chest heaving, blood streaking her flank. Her eyes flickered from fury to disbelief. The outcasts stood firm, silent, their bodies shaking but unbroken. The pack hesitated, sensing a shift they couldn't name. Above the silence, only the cub's soft breath remained, a fragile sound that had changed the order of the wild. When the pack finally retreated, the valley fell eerily quiet. Blood steamed in the snow where their fight had been. The two wolves stood motionless, sides heaving, eyes locked on the trail their kind had taken. The alpha's scent faded slowly into distance, carried away by the wind. The brother limped, blood staining his paw where teeth had torn skin. The she-wolf pressed her muzzle against his shoulder, not as gesture, but necessity, confirmation of survival. Behind them, the den waited, silent witness to their defiance. Inside, the cub stirred, sensing calm after chaos. Above, clouds drifted apart, letting cold light spill across the scarred ground. What had begun as instinct had become rebellion, and rebellion had become something even older, an unspoken bond that dared to rewrite nature's order. In the snow between them lay more than blood. It was the first trace of a new pack, built not by hierarchy, but by love.
Days passed beneath a gray sky that neither threatened nor blessed. The wolves traveled east, away from territory marked by blood. Their steps left shallow impressions in thawing snow, a slow pilgrimage towards something unknown. The cub, growing stronger, now followed clumsily behind, its paws too large for balance, its curiosity uncontained. The brother hunted while the sister guarded, every glance between them unspoken understanding. They reached a ridge scarred by old lightning, its soil rich, its caves deep enough to conceal scent. Here, they built what the wild had no name for, a refuge outside order. The cub's breath fogged the air as it explored, pawing at stones, climbing over roots. For the first time since the fire that hadn't yet come, laughter existed again, not human, not civilized, but alive. The mountain wind shifted. What began as exile was evolving into sanctuary, and the wilderness, always watching, chose to stay silent. Winter loosened its grip. Ice melted into rivulets that carved through the valley, feeding streams reborn from frost. The cub thrived, its fur thickening, eyes bright with restless hunger. It watched the wolves with growing fascination, how they hunted, moved, communicated without sound.
When the she-wolf ran, it followed. When the brother circled prey, the cub mirrored his stance, awkward but learning. Instinct blurred, dissolving into imitation. In time, the bear began to howl, not perfectly, but close enough to make both wolves pause in wonder. The sound echoed across the ridge, raw and wild, a creature learning to belong somewhere it was never meant to. The wolves accepted it without question. The cub slept between them now, its massive body curling beside their smaller forms. Snow turned to mud beneath their paws, and together they crossed the season's threshold, no longer predator and prey, but fragments of one evolving heartbeat.
From her distant station, Lyra Voss watched the impossible unfold. The satellite feed, blurred by snow interference, still managed to capture patterns unmistakable even through static. The wolf, her brother, and the cub moved together like synchronized instincts, three rhythms merging into one. Lyra replayed the sequences frame by frame, heart pounding, not from discovery, but disbelief. Years of field work had taught her cruelty wrapped in efficiency, nature's perfection through violence. Yet here, the footage whispered contradiction, compassion as evolution. She archived the files under new classification, interspecies mutualism, though the term felt sterile compared to what she saw. Late at night, she imagined standing in that forest, feeling the air vibrate with quiet harmony. She wondered if empathy, buried deep in wild DNA, had simply waited long enough to surface. Outside the lab's glass, snow fell endlessly. Inside, science began to bend, softening under the weight of something that couldn't be measured. The sanctuary ridge, though remote, didn't stay secret for long. The scent of blood from old hunts traveled farther than the wolves knew. A mountain lion began to circle the area, silent, patient, unseen. Its amber eyes caught faint reflections of fur and movement through dense pine. It waited until dusk, when the pack's guard lowered. The cub ventured near a stream, pawing at water frozen thin. The air changed. Even the wind hesitated. The predator moved like shadow itself, each muscle a thread of violence drawn taut. The she-wolf sensed it too late. Her growl split the silence, echoed by her brother's roar of warning. The lion leapt, a blur of claws and muscle. What followed was chaos woven into instinct. The wolves defending what wasn't theirs by blood, the cub fighting beside them, learning brutality as survival. When the snow settled, the lion retreated limping. For the first time, family had fought as one.
The clearing bore the aftermath of violence, fur, claw marks, frozen streaks of blood. The cub trembled, not from fear, but from something new, purpose. The wolves circled close, checking wounds, their breaths clouding the cold air. The she-wolf pressed her nose to the cub's shoulder where blood had dried, not hers, not its own, but shared. The brother's flank bled freely, the mark of loyalty written in red. Above them, crows watched from the trees, black witnesses to a bond that defied reason. The forest, once indifferent, seemed to pause in reverence. This was not dominance, not hierarchy. It was covenant, an unspoken vow formed through battle and blood. The wolves no longer saw a bear. The cub no longer saw predators. They had rewritten the ritual of belonging, sealing it not with ceremony, but with wounds that would scar into history. In that silence, the sanctuary became something sacred, something eternal. Time began to stretch differently on the ridge. Days bled into one another, punctuated only by the rhythm of hunts and the cub's growing weight. Lyra named it in her notes, hope. not as a label of sentiment, but as acknowledgement of something that refused extinction. Through remote cameras, she watched as the cub learned, failed, and adapted. Its movements sharpened, its gaze keener. It mimicked pack formations, flanking prey, herding alongside wolves with uncanny precision. When food grew scarce, it shared kills instead of hoarding them, behavior no textbook could explain. Lyra's voice logs grew quieter, more reverent. "It isn't survival," she murmured once to herself. "It's evolution choosing mercy." On the ridge, Hope rested between the two wolves, her massive body pressed against theirs, eyes half closed. The forest whispered with thawing water and distant thunder. Nature, ever proud, had made something new and refused to look away.
Spring unfurled in slow breaths, painting the valley in soft greens and thawed rivers. The wolves began marking boundaries, their movements deliberate, protective. Hope followed, curious, mimicking each ritual. When they howled, she roared, a sound that rolled through the mountains like distant thunder. Other packs heard it and paused, uncertain of what creature claimed the ridge. No single scent could explain it. Wolf, bear, blood, smoke. The brother moved along the perimeter, leaving his scent on falling trees, while the sister trained Hope to watch the sky for eagles and the ground for trespassers. The ridge, once a refuge, was now a realm. Not ruled, but guarded. The trio's bond had drawn invisible borders that no predator dared to cross. From above, snowmelt reflected sunlight into the den like water made of fire. Life, rebuilt from defiance, now had a name. And in that name, the forest began to remember kindness. But harmony never lasted in the wild. Distant packs began to move toward the ridge, drawn by scent, curiosity, and unease. Old instincts whispered that something unnatural had taken root, something that broke the order of predator and prey. Among them, the alpha who had once exiled her stirred with anger. Frost, scarred but unbroken, rallied her wolves with the authority of vengeance. They moved under cover of night, their paws soundless against thawed soil. The scent of Hope's fur reached them first, unfamiliar, powerful, wrong. Frost paused, her breath visible in the moonlight, and snarled. There would be no forgiveness, no curiosity, only correction. On the ridge, the air thickened. The brother lifted his head, sensing the tremor in the wind. The sister rose beside Hope, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The forest shifted. The sanctuary had become a fortress, and war, inevitable as fire, was coming home.
The valley slept beneath a sky of bruised blue. Wind crept through the pines like whispered warning. The wolves and Hope rested side by side near the den, bodies touching, breath forming small clouds that mingled in the air. None slept deeply. The brother's ears twitched with every sound, the sister's gaze fixed on the tree line where darkness pulsed, thicker than usual. Hope lifted her head once, scenting the air. The musk of wolves, many, carried faintly through the cold. She rumbled low, her body vibrating with protective instinct. The wolves exchanged no signal. They didn't need one. They knew what approached. Above, the moon burned white, indifferent witness to what would unfold. Time crawled. Every gust, every broken twig, every tremor beneath the earth felt like a countdown. In that stillness, they became statues of resolve. When dawn came, blood would follow. The forest, patient and ancient, simply waited to remember. The attack began at first light. Frost's pack emerged from the shadows like a single living weapon. 10 wolves moving as one, breath steaming in unison. The ridge erupted in motion. The sister positioned herself between the den and the advancing pack, the brother beside her, flanks brushing.
Hope reared to full height behind them, her roar shaking the air. The pack hesitated. Instinct buckled at the sight of bear and wolves united. Then Frost lunged, and the clearing exploded into chaos. Snow churned red beneath snarls and roars. The brother took down one attacker. The sister bit through another's ear. Hope charged, striking with massive paws that shattered bone. Frost circled, faster, smarter, relentless. Blood sprayed like mist through morning light. For every strike they blocked, two more came. They were outnumbered, outmatched, yet unbroken. In that violent ballet, family was no longer defined by blood, but by who refused to leave.
The ridge trembled beneath the weight of chaos. The air was thick with fur and blood, every heartbeat a percussion of survival. Frost's pack pressed inward, overwhelming with sheer numbers. The brother faltered, one leg torn open, his breath breaking into shallow bursts. The sister held fast, her fur matted crimson, her body between Hope and the attackers. Hope roared again, her voice echoing through the valley like thunder made flesh. Snow avalanched from cliffs, scattering light into fragments. Still, the pack did not retreat. Frost lunged for the den, teeth flashing like glass. Hope intercepted her, massive paw striking with a force that sent both spinning into the snow. The ground split under their collision. For an instant, silence swallowed the ridge. Breath steamed. Blood steamed. The law of predator and prey had dissolved into smoke. When the sound returned, it wasn't growls. It was the rising chorus of the dying and the defiant. Time fractured into snapshots. The brother down, the sister bleeding, Hope surrounded. Each heartbeat replayed the same question: how far would love defy instinct? Frost's wolves attacked in waves, relentless, trained by generations of dominance. Hope fought with raw power, no rhythm, no strategy, just fury born from gratitude. Her claws carved through snow and skin alike, but exhaustion grew heavier with each strike. The sister limped to her brother's side, teeth snapping at any wolf that neared. Frost circled again, her white coat streaked red, eyes glinting with triumph and rage. Above them, ravens gathered, dark constellations forming over carnage. For 7 minutes, the ridge was nothing but motion and sound, blood and snow, heartbeats and silence. Then the wind shifted, carrying a sound that didn't belong, an unfamiliar howl from the north, deep and solitary, answered by two more. The forest turned its gaze. Reinforcements were coming, though none could explain why.
From the northern ridge, 3 shapes appeared, wolves, lean and scarred, moving like phantoms through the haze of blood and snow. Dispersers, loners without pack or allegiance, drawn by the sound of battle. Frost turned sharply, growl cutting through the chaos. These weren't hers. The strangers descended fast, no hesitation, their eyes locked not on prey, but on Frost's attackers. The first slammed into Frost's flank, sending her staggering. The second joined the sister's side without pause. The third, a male with half a tail, bared his teeth at Frost's enforcers, unafraid. Confusion split Frost's pack, hesitation cracked their formation. For the first time, the sanctuary wolves outnumbered their hunters. The tides shifted, the forest roaring approval in the rush of wind. Frost lunged again, but this time her target was met by unity, 5 wolves and 1 bear fighting as one pulse. Snow turned scarlet, the line between chaos and salvation drawn in blood. The alpha fought like a storm, her body a weapon honed by dominance and survival. She bit through the stranger's neck, shaking him violently, but another took his place. Hope's roar shattered the soundscape, a sound so deep it rattled the mountain itself. She struck Frost mid-charge, claws sinking into white fur, crushing bone beneath weight and wrath. Frost fell, not killed but broken, her body half buried in the snow. Her pack froze, instincts fracturing between loyalty and fear. The sister stood over her fallen enemy, chest heaving, blood dripping from her jaws. The brother limped to her side, his wounded leg trembling. The dispersers circled, their breath steaming, waiting for the next order that would never come. Above them, the ravens screamed and took flight. Frost's pack retreated, tails low, their alpha left behind in the snow, alive but dethroned. In the silence that followed, leadership itself seemed to change species.
The strangers did not leave. When the snow settled, they approached slowly, bodies low, ears flat. Not challengers, but seekers. The sister met their eyes, weary but resolute. They bowed their heads, one by one, the ancient gesture of allegiance. Hope stood behind her, vast and solemn, her breath fogging in rhythmic clouds. The brother limped forward and touched noses with the largest of the dispersers. An agreement passed unspoken, older than language. 5 wolves now stood together under no hierarchy, bound not by dominance, but by choice. The bear was the axis of their faith, the reason their rebellion had survived. They dug new dens near the ridge, marking the boundaries with unity instead of fear. The forest named them silently, the sanctuary pack. Where other wolves ruled through blood, they led through defiance, loyalty, and something the wild had long forgotten: mercy that demanded no surrender. Spring thawed the valley, revealing bones beneath melting snow. The sanctuary pack moved carefully among them, burying the dead where they fell. Hope lingered near the graves, her snout brushing the earth as though memorizing every loss. The sister watched her quietly, recognizing grief mirrored in another species. Life returned in waves, moss greening over scars, streams whispering again through rock. The brother hunted with renewed strength, while the dispersers patrolled the perimeter. Days grew longer, the air softened. Hope's wounds healed into pale scars that shone under sunlight. When the wolves howled now, their songs were different, not calls of dominance, but harmonies of survival. Even the forest seemed changed, quieter, reverent. The sanctuary had survived fire, betrayal, and blood. In its silence grew something new, a rhythm of coexistence, fragile yet fierce, carrying the weight of a future no law had prepared for. They were no longer anomalies. They were evolution.
Summer came gentle and strange. For the first time since exile, peace held the ridge. The sister's body changed, fuller, slower, a rhythm beneath her skin signaling life within. The brother guarded her closely, while the dispersers brought food and stood watch. Hope stayed near always, a silent sentinel at the den entrance. When the day came, rain fell in fine threads over the forest, each droplet reflecting silver light. Deep within the den, new voices entered the world, 4 small whimpers breaking through the steady hum of storm. The sister lay trembling, exhaustion heavy but radiant. Outside, Hope shifted, lowering her massive head to the entrance, breathing in the scent of new life. The pup's cries softened under her watch. The brother stood beside her, gaze unblinking. Together, they guarded the beginning of something the forest had never seen: wolf pups born into a family that included a bear as their first protector. The days that followed were marked by tenderness sharper than battle. Hope scarcely left the den's mouth, her enormous body forming a wall against the outside world.
The pups tumbled over her paws, tiny and fearless, climbing fur as though it were part of the earth. She endured their play with impossible gentleness, adjusting her weight to avoid crushing them. When danger scented the wind, she rose before the wolves did, senses sharpened by maternal instinct, not her own. The sister rested, trusting completely. The brother hunted deeper into the valley, returning with prey large enough to feed all. At night, Hope's breath filled the den with a low hum, a lullaby shaped by survival and love. The pack slept curled around her warmth, the sound of rain tapping the leaves above. What began as defiance had become family, an alliance no instinct could undo, no fire could erase.
By late autumn, food grew scarce. The valley's rivers thinned into glass, and the air turned brittle with frost. The sanctuary pack faced a new test, not war, but famine. The brother ranged far, chasing faint scents of elk. The dispersers split into pairs, returning with little. The sister's body, lean from nursing, trembled as she watched her pups sleep. Hope sensed the hunger first. She left the ridge alone, vanishing into the deeper forest. Days passed with no trace. The wolves waited, restless, torn between fear and faith. On the fifth morning, a tremor echoed from the trees, a deep, rhythmic crunching. Hope returned, dragging an elk carcass twice her size, her fur matted with mud and snow. She dropped it before the den, chest heaving, eyes bright with triumph. The wolves circled, silent with awe. The bear had become provider. Mercy had evolved again, this time into sustenance. The forest settled into winter's breath once more. Snow muffled all trace of struggle, softening the world into quiet shapes. The sanctuary pack grew strong again, the pups now fearless explorers beneath Hope's watch. They learned to stalk, to leap, to hide, guided not only by wolves, but by the patience of a bear who had defied extinction. Nights fell long and cold, but their den glowed with shared warmth. The brother's limp faded, the sister's scars dulled to silver threads. Hope's size dwarfed them all, yet she moved gently, her every gesture careful. Sometimes, when moonlight struck her face, she would look toward the horizon, where frost had once ruled, and blink slowly, as if in forgiveness. The world beyond remained wild, dangerous, cruel, but here, in this hollow ridge, silence no longer meant fear. It meant peace hard won, guarded by those who once refused to destroy what they could instead love.
It began with the wind. Subtle at first, a dry current slipping between pine needles, carrying the scent of something distant, unnatural. The wolves lifted their heads in unison. Hope rose, nostrils flaring, breath thick in the cold air. Smoke. It threaded through the valley like a whisper of the past. The forest, once green and forgiving, began to hold its breath. Birds vanished. Insects fell silent. Even the river seemed to hesitate in its course. The brother climbed to the ridge and saw it, a low haze rolling across the horizon, gray turning to orange. Fire. It moved fast, alive with hunger, devouring everything in its path. Panic flickered in the pack's eyes. They had survived predators, famine, and war, but not this. Hope turned toward the wind, muscles rippling beneath her thick coat. The flames had found the sanctuary, and the wilderness had come to reclaim what it had briefly allowed to live. The valley filled with the sound of fleeing life. Elk stampeded through ravines, foxes vanished into cracks between roots, hawks wheeled low in frantic circles. The fire consumed distance like a predator with no mercy. The wolves gathered near the den, their instincts tearing between flight and protection. Hope nudged the pups gently, her massive frame shadowing them from falling ash. The sister paced near the entrance, her mind calculating routes that no longer existed. The brother barked warnings into the smoke, trying to guide the others, but the wind betrayed them, shifting without pattern, carrying sparks that fell like burning snow. Heat pulsed through the earth, each wave stronger than the last. The sanctuary ridge, once untouched by violence, now glowed with encroaching flame. The wolves hesitated at the edge of escape. Hope did not. She turned back toward the den, into the smoke, with the smallest hearts still waited to be saved.
Smoke wrapped the ridge in a veil of ghostly gray. The den's entrance glowed faintly from within, light not of safety, but of reflection. The pups whimpered, pressing against the dirt walls. The sister crouched low, eyes burning from heat and ash. Hope entered, her fur already singed at the tips, carrying the scent of char and courage. The brother followed, coughing through the haze. Outside, the trees ignited one by one, their sap hissing like boiling blood. Inside, Hope began to dig, her paws striking the earth with brutal speed. She widened the den's inner chamber, throwing dirt backward, deepening their refuge. The wolves joined her, scraping furiously despite the heat. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the world collapsed above them. The air thinned, thick with fire's breath. Hope growled low, not in anger, but in command. Every movement meant survival, every heartbeat meant defiance. And in that suffocating dark, they refused to surrender. The fire reached the ridge in a single thunderous wave. The trees exploded in pillars of flame, the sound more roar than crackle. Inside the den, heat pressed inward like an unseen predator. The wolves huddled with the pups, eyes wide, bodies trembling. Hope stood at the mouth, blocking the inferno with her size alone. Flames curled around her silhouette, a colossal shadow outlined in gold. Her fur burned at the edges, smoke rising from her skin, but she didn't move. The fire's light painted her eyes amber and endless. She pressed her weight against the entrance, sealing the den with her own body. Inside, the wolves buried their faces in her scent, earth, ash, and sacrifice. Above them, the sky screamed in color. Hope exhaled once, a deep, rattling breath that seemed to push back the fire itself. For those inside, silence followed. For Hope, only heat. Then, everything turned white.
When the wind died, so did the sound. The ridge that had once sung with life fell quiet beneath a blanket of smoke. The fire moved on, leaving ruin behind, blackened trunks, smoldering roots, air too heavy to breathe. For hours, nothing stirred. Then, beneath the ash, movement. The den's roof sagged inward as the brother clawed upward, breaking through layers of soot and dirt. He emerged coughing, eyes stinging, fur matted gray. Behind him came the sister, carrying a limp pup in her jaws. It was breathing. The others followed, one by one, blinking into the colorless dawn. They stumbled into a world erased, the ground beneath them still warm from death. Hope's body lay across the entrance, her fur charred, her massive frame shielding the den from the worst of the heat. The wolves approached her silently. The sister pressed her forehead to Hope's flank. It was still warm. It was still alive. At first, it was only the faintest twitch, a tremor under the weight of ash. The sister stepped back, eyes wide, unsure if she imagined it. Then another. Hope's chest rose, shallow but certain, forcing smoke through her scorched throat. Her breath rattled like stones in wind. The wolves gathered close, their bodies forming a circle around her. The brother nudged her muzzle gently. Her eyes opened halfway, clouded but aware. The pups pressed against her neck, whimpering softly. Hope exhaled a sound that wasn't pain, it was relief. She had kept her promise. The fire had failed to take everything. The wolves began to dig again, clearing ash from her fur, revealing singed skin and scars that glowed faintly beneath soot. The air filled with the scent of burnt pine and persistence. Hope's pulse beat slow, heavy, eternal. Against the odds, the protector had survived the inferno. Mercy itself had refused to burn.
They stayed beside her for days. The air remained heavy with smoke, sunlight filtered to amber haze. The wolves took turns hunting while the others guarded her side. Hope could no longer stand. Her fur peeled in places, revealing dark, healing skin. The sister licked her wounds clean. The brother brought water and soaked moss. The pups nestled near her belly, their small bodies warming what life remained. Time slowed to a rhythm of care and silence. Humans appeared days later, rangers in masks, drawn by motion sensors and satellite alerts. They found the den surrounded by ash and life. One look at Hope's burns, at the wolves clustered around her like sentinels, and their mission changed from observation to awe. They brought stretchers, supplies, and water. The wolves didn't flee. They simply watched as the world that once studied them now bent to their survival. The forest, against all odds, had chosen to heal. Weeks passed in uncertain mercy. Hope was moved to a rehabilitation site on the valley's edge, her burns treated, her breathing stabilized. The wolves followed at a distance, never crossing into human ground, but never leaving sight. The sister stood at the perimeter each night, eyes reflecting the faint glow of campfires. Inside the facility, Hope slept beneath bandages and gentle lights. Each day she grew stronger. Her fur began to regrow in uneven patches, silver where fire had once claimed color. The rangers marveled at her resilience, but they didn't understand. This wasn't recovery, it was preparation. When the time came, the gates opened, and she stepped into the wilderness again. The wolves emerged from the shadows to meet her, 4 pups tumbling at their mother's feet. Hope approached slowly, then pressed her muzzle against the sister's head. No words, no cries, just recognition. The sanctuary was whole again.
Months turned to years. The forest, once charred and hollow, bloomed again with fragile defiance. Young trees pushed through ash, green sprouting from black. The sanctuary pack thrived in the valley's heart, their bond deep as root and flame. Hope's scars never faded. They traced her body like rivers of memory, reminders of what she had endured to preserve life. The wolves followed her lead even as their own pups matured, spreading to new ridges. When they howled, her deep rumble joined, echoing like thunder rolling through the reborn canopy. Travelers sometimes reported glimpses, a massive bear walking beside wolves, sunlight flashing off silver scars. Most dismissed it as legend, but those who saw her eyes, steady and alive, understood. Hope had become more than survival. She was proof that compassion could shape evolution, that fire could not erase love, and that sometimes the wild chooses kindness over instinct. Every year, when the first frost touched the valley, the wolves returned to the ridge where fire had ended and begun everything. They gathered beneath the stars, their breaths rising in pale clouds. Hope stood among them, older now, her fur streaked with gray. The pups she'd once guarded were grown, leading packs of their own. The brother and sister rested nearby, their bodies scarred but strong. Together they howled, a long, low sound that carried through the trees like prayer. The forest listened, the wind shifted,
and from somewhere unseen, the earth answered with the echo of crackling flame, not as destruction, but as memory. In that sound lived everything they had survived: the storm, the hunger, the fire, and the impossible mercy that had rewritten nature itself. As the stars shimmered above, Hope lifted her head and howled last, her voice deep and endless, a living monument to love that refused extinction.
Seasons passed with gentle precision. The forest forgot the outlines of fire, only its lessons remained. The sanctuary pack spread across valleys and ridges, offspring forming splintered families that carried the same strange calm in their eyes. No one remembered hunger as violence anymore. They hunted to balance, not to rule. In every generation, one pup carried the gray streaks of Hope's fur along its spine, a birthmark shaped like smoke. The humans who monitored the valley noticed patterns they couldn't explain. Fewer territorial fights, cooperative hunts between species, shared dens during storms. It was as if instinct itself had bent. Deep beneath roots and stone, the den where everything began still existed, hollow and untouched. When the wind passed through, it produced a low hum, a sound that resembled breathing. The forest, once divided by fear, now carried that hum as its heartbeat, steady, patient, alive. Years after the first footage, Dr. Lyra Voss returned to the valley. The research station had long been reclaimed by moss and quiet. She walked alone through corridors of trees, following the same coordinates that had once haunted her data. Snow crunched beneath her boots, echoing faintly through still air. Her equipment was outdated, her pace slow, but her memory was sharp. When she reached the ridge, she stopped. The forest had transformed. Ash replaced by green, ruin by renewal. She set down her recorder and simply listened. The valley pulsed with life. Paw steps in snow, distant howls, the soft breaking of ice in the river. Then she saw them. 3 wolves at the tree line, their shapes half hidden. One stepped forward, its coat streaked with silver, eyes ancient and familiar. Lyra lowered her head in respect. No data could define this. Some truths were meant not to be measured, but witnessed.
Among the wolves stood the great bear, older now, slower, yet majestic in every motion. Hope's silver scars caught the weak sunlight, glowing faintly like rivers of mercury across her fur. Lyra stood frozen, breath caught between disbelief and devotion. Hope turned her head slightly, meeting her gaze with the calm of recognition. The wolves flanked her, protective but unafraid. The moment stretched beyond time, 2 species and 1 witness bound by shared history. The bear inhaled deeply, exhaled a plume of mist that hung in the cold air before vanishing. Lyra whispered nothing. She didn't dare break the silence. Hope stepped forward, nose brushing a fallen branch, then turned back toward the forest. The wolves followed, vanishing between pines. The valley closed behind them, wind carrying only the faint echo of movement. The Mother of Smoke had returned to her world, and Lyra finally understood that mercy could outlive memory. The next spring brought pups again, 3 litters scattered through the sanctuary's reach. Among them were wolves born with unusual markings, pale crescents on their chests, faint silver undercoats that shimmered in sunlight. The elders watched in quiet recognition. They called these young ones the children of Ember, said to carry Hope's endurance in their blood. Their instincts were strange, gentler, more observant. They shared kills with smaller scavengers, tolerated ravens at their feasts, and played near elk calves without harm. The forest adapted around them, less divided by predator and prey, more balanced by rhythm. Humans studying from afar noted the shift, but misread it as coincidence. Only the wind knew truth. It carried the faint sounds of laughter, low, rumbling, animal joy.
The descendants of fire had inherited not scars, but understanding. And in their eyes burned something bright, not feral, but luminous, the evolution of compassion itself.
When snow returned, the valley became pilgrimage. Wolves from far territories traveled to the burned ridge, drawn by instinct they couldn't name. They circled the hollow where hope had once stood, tails low, eyes soft. No one fought, no one hunted. They moved like ghosts through the ashes, brushing their muzzles against charred trunks as though greeting ancestors. The forest held its breath, remembering every sound, every sacrifice. Overhead, ravens wheeled in slow, deliberate arcs. The air hummed with stillness. A young wolf approached the center, lying down in the exact hollow that had once been a den. It exhaled deeply, steam curling into the sky. The pack joined one by one, bodies pressed close, warmth shared. Above them, clouds parted just enough to reveal faint stars. For a moment, the valley seemed to glow from within, as if the fire had never died but learned to shine quietly instead. Lyra's field recorder, left on that ridge, captured what it could: wind, distant howls, and something else, a resonant hum impossible to identify. Acoustic software later marked it as interference, but those who listened heard something older. It wasn't wind, it wasn't flame, it was heartbeat, layered and low, matching the rhythm of breath across species. The recording spread among researchers, dismissed by most as artifact. Yet those who listened carefully swore they could hear it shift when wolves howled in unison. A third voice joining, deep and slow, like the exhale of a sleeping giant. Some claimed it was Hope's spirit. Others said the mountain itself had learned her voice. Lyra never explained it. She kept the recording sealed, labeled only with the single word: survived. Decades later, when new fires burned distant forests, that same hum was detected again, as if the memory of compassion moved faster than flame.
Generations later, when the sanctuary pack had become legend, the valley remained untouched by major conflict. Wolves hunted with restraint, bears shared feeding grounds, even mountain lions avoided needless kill. Balance had replaced fear. The humans who returned came not to study, but to protect. They named the valley Emberfield, though locals called it by another name, the place of the Mercy Fire. Every child who hiked there was told the story of the wolf and the bear who rewrote nature's code. Some believed it, others didn't, but when night fell and the wind shifted through pine and ash, everyone heard the same thing, a low vibration that sounded like breathing, sometimes accompanied by faint, rhythmic thumps. The wild no longer needed words to tell its stories. It remembered in sound, in rhythm, in the pulse of survival that had chosen kindness over conquest. In her final season, Hope grew slow. Her fur silvered completely, her movements measured like tides. The wolves stayed near her, sensing time's approach. One dawn, she climbed alone to the ridge where fire had once roared, her body framed by the same horizon that had nearly ended her. Snow fell gently, layering her footprints as she moved. She lay down beside a young pine sprouting through ash, its roots twisting through memory. She watched the valley below, alive, green, eternal, and closed her eyes. When the wolves found her hours later, the snow around her was untouched, unbroken, as if the forest itself had lifted her into silence. They circled her body, heads bowed, breath misting together. No sound followed, only stillness. The wind carried her scent down the ridge,
soft as smoke. The mother of smoke had returned to the element that once tried to claim her.
Spring arrived without warning. Life unfolded where her body had rested, flowers pushing through thawed soil, insects stirring in rhythmic waves. The young pine grew faster than the rest, bark smooth and bright. Wolves came to rest beneath its shade, their pups climbing its roots. Hope's bones, left to the earth, became part of the soil's pulse. When storms passed through, lightning struck near the ridge but never touched the tree. The wolves called it the guardian pine. Lyra, now gray-haired, visited one last time, leaving her old recorder at its base. She pressed her palm to the trunk, feeling the faint vibration inside. It matched her heartbeat. She smiled, not with sorrow, but with completion. Above her, the wind changed direction, carrying warmth instead of chill. Hope was gone, but her mercy had rooted itself deeper than blood or myth. It had become part of the forest's endless rhythm. Night fell soft over the valley. Stars mirrored in pools of melted snow, turning the forest floor into a reflection of the sky. Wolves moved quietly between shadows, their howls rising in slow, rolling harmony. From the ridge, the sound carried far beyond the valley, merging with the low hum of wind through trees. The world listened. Where fire had once destroyed, life now sang. No creature ruled, no law demanded. The wild had found equilibrium not through strength, but through empathy. The bear's legacy remained in every heartbeat, in every act of restraint, in every shared breath beneath the guardian pine. Lyra's recorder blinked once before its battery died, capturing the final sound, a deep, synchronized exhale. The forest breathed out, the stars flickered brighter, and across the endless silence that followed, the story of the wolf and the bear endured, alive, eternal, written not in fire, but in mercy.